We're with the Digital Digest, and today we're taking a look at the Microsoft Surface Duo because as of this morning, August 12th, 2020, it is official. You can pre-order the base configuration, 128 gigs of internal storage for $13.99. That is US dollars. The 256 gig is $14.99. And for those of you that missed this at the end of last year, it is a clamshell device with a hinge that allows it to rotate or open up 360 degrees of motion. That means you can essentially read it like a book. You have two displays, 5.6-inch AMOLEDs, pretty solid resolution. You can use it as one continuous display in spite of the fact that, of course, there is a break in between them because of the hinge. This is not a folding phone like we've seen popularized by Samsung, the concept being, at least from Samsung, that you could have a larger device without the larger device's footprint. Well, this is kind of the opposite, which is a bit of a head scratcher. It's a larger device that gets larger. In fact, I think this is actually too big to be a phone to begin with, but that doesn't mean that I don't think it's incredibly cool. Now, it is very far from perfect. I think it's too expensive, and I could say that about a lot of things, but this is egregious, and I'll get into why. When we saw this at the end of 2019, I thought it held tremendous promise. After all, this is the realization of Microsoft's Courier device 10 years later, and something that was going to be available to consumers in wide release. And it really does make sense when you think about it. You just saw it as an e-reader, using both displays in basically any fashion you want. But here's the part that doesn't. Putting that to your head to make a phone call. Really? Microsoft is calling this pocketable, but it's anything but pocketable. I mean, this makes the Galaxy Note 20 Ultra look small, but what it doesn't do is make the Galaxy Note 20 Ultra look expensive, and that's because this is just as expensive, if not more, and its features, its specifications, well, they leave a lot to be desired. So let's talk about that, because that, unfortunately, along with some engineering and designing, seems to be the real Achilles for this device, because aesthetically, I think it's a beautiful piece of hardware in spite of its chunky bezels. I think Microsoft did a very nice job here. But that's pretty much the end of it. And I do think that from a software standpoint, what they're going to be able to do is truly utilize dual screens in the same way that right now I use my Windows desktop with a triple monitor setup. I mean, that is the extension of the experience they're betting on. And I think it's a good bet that no one has really done properly. Yes, LG has clamshell devices like this that are the size of traditional smartphones, which makes more sense, but their application isn't so great. Here, I believe the software execution will be better. After all, Microsoft is the largest software manufacturer in the world, but that doesn't negate all of the problems that I have with this issue as of release. So the first thing I'm going to say is with the pricing, I already established, it's just too expensive. It makes my Galaxy Z Flip look affordable, at least from a specification standpoint. Forget practicality. But the biggest problem, pricing aside, inferior specs aside, is that you have to open this thing up to use it. And I thought when they showed it off at the end of 2019, we would get some sort of update that would prove that this wouldn't be the final product, that there would be a way, some visualization of notifications, something like we have on the Z Flip and the original Galaxy Fold and Z Fold 2, which only improved upon its external display. I thought there would be something like that. But Microsoft decided when this thing is closed, you're out of business. You're not doing anything with it. And I just do not understand how they think that's going to appeal to anyone. I've heard them pitching it as a way to disconnect. Well, that would be good if we all didn't have to earn a living, and that's in the middle of a pandemic to boot. And I can discount the pandemic and say that even if this launched and this was a good old healthy 2020, well, it couldn't be even if there was no pandemic. But if that were the case, economically speaking, I would have all the same problems with this device. So a lot of people out there saying, how could they do this in a pandemic? I'm going to say, how could they do this regardless of the pandemic? And that's because first and foremost, as I just mentioned, you've got to open it up to use it. That's problem number one. Problem number two, pricing. If the price was this high and specifications were there to match, I wouldn't be complaining about pricing. After all, it's $500 at its most expensive configuration less than the Galaxy Z Fold 2 is likely going to be. Although I do think the first-gen Fold could be a better device than this, so that's another major problem. And so the specs. besides it being huge at 250 grams, and yes, you do have 8.1 inches of screen real estate, granted not continuous like you'd get with a folding device. You can see right there, they are AMOLEDs. I think that's one of the most promising elements of this launch, is that it's the first Surface device, the first Microsoft product to have AMOLED displays. And hopefully this means that's trickling down to all of their other products, meaning the Surface Pro, of course, the Surface Neo when it launches. That's the larger version of this device that will be an Ultrabook with the same design language. Hopefully, we're going to see this in the Surface Book 3, Surface Laptop 4. Surface Book 4, Surface Laptop 4. I want to see this even in the Surface Go. So hopefully the AMOLEDs make it. Two 5.6-inch displays sound great, but again, from a practicality point, even with the 4:3 aspect ratio, this thing is so wide, it's ridiculous. The battery life estimates are concerning, to say the least. You see them there. 15 and a half hours of local video playback. That means not from the internet. 10 hours of standby, 27 hours of talk time. That's all good and dandy, but they must be assuming you're going to keep this thing closed all day in order to achieve any sort of battery life, because the battery is 3,577 milliamp hours, approximately the same as my Galaxy Z Flip. Now, there's no 5G. We've got a Qualcomm Snapdragon 855, 6 gigs of RAM. We have a single 11 megapixel camera. If you're wondering why, it's because they want to keep it clean, and I get it. But if you're going to do that, give us a better camera. I don't mean higher megapixels. Give me a 1-inch sensor so that I have the camera to rule them all. If you're going to only give me one, because I don't believe in this hype. In fact, I hate the notch that Apple started and that now is in Samsung's realm with the S20 Ultra lineup as well as the Note 20 Ultra. I hate that bump out. I think it's just the laziest engineering on earth. It just shows like they gave up. They don't want to make the device thicker, so they're just going to glue it on. They don't have to figure out a way to integrate it. Well, here, they took the approach of, we're not going to do that, and I agree with that, but they also aren't giving us a camera that I think will be anything more than serviceable. But that's not where the shit show ends. So no 5G. I don't really care about that. It's not in my market. But at this price point, every device that carries this price now, especially since the Z Flip 5G launched, you do have 5G. So there is a level of future-proofing. So at this point, I used to always say I don't care about 5G, but now manufacturers are building it into the price, and it's there whether you care or not. So considering we're living in that world, there should be 5G, even if I wouldn't be able to utilize it. Another big concern, no Wi-Fi 6. You can see right here, Wi-Fi 5. Now, I'm not sure what they were thinking with this, but yeah, Wi-Fi 5. Bluetooth 5.0, LTE I already discussed, so 5G out the window. No storage expansion, I could live with that also, but the Snapdragon 855, which is a completely competent processor, don't get me wrong, but it's flagship 2019. 6 gigs of RAM, that's less than the 8 in my Z Flip, less than the 12 in my Note 10 Plus. It's less than the 8 that are in my Note 9 512. I mean, I just can't wrap my head around it. And also the fact that they went with UFS 3.0 internal storage. I'm nitpicking here, but all of the new flagships, at least Samsung's Note 20 launch, the 20 Ultra, UFS 3.1. If you don't know what that means, it's just much faster, or at least faster. I won't get into literal benchmarking, but faster, latest and greatest internal storage speed capacity. And then the real kicker, remember, this is not just a phone, but a consumption device. You get a beautiful mono speaker. You heard right. This 250-gram paperweight, no matter how thin it is, doesn't have stereo audio. Mind-numbing. No Wi-Fi charging, no NFC, no IP rating, which I thought would absolutely be a major differentiator for this, but clearly the hinge is still the problem. So that means you cannot get this wet. It is not dust resistant. So it's just as fragile as any of Samsung's folding phones, except for the fact that you can put a fingernail or a stylus to the display. That is a differentiating element. But at the end of the day, not having those things pushes me right back to the Galaxy Z Fold 2. In fact, I don't know why you would even consider this. If you're willing to lay out $1,500, even $1,400 for a device like this, do yourself a favor and get a Fold, whether it's the first gen or the second gen, which arrives on, or at least launches officially for pre-order on September 1. I can't imagine opting for this over it. Now, with that said, I did pre-order this because I'm going to give Microsoft their fair shake here. In fact, I do think that they're going to be successful with this, not in this generation, but over time, because this is a good starting point. The problem is it's a good starting point in 2019. 18-watt charging, I was critical of the fact that the Note 20 Ultra line took a step backwards from the Note 10 Plus having 45-watt charging capability optionally. Now, Samsung went back to 25 watts in a world where Chinese manufacturers are showing off 120-watt quick charging. So I really don't know what the hell Microsoft was thinking with this, other than that fanboyism, loyalty to the brand, similar to what Apple has created, a cult following, will lure people into purchasing this just because it's different and not because it's actually good. And that's not to say that I don't think this product will be good, because I do. I don't think it's going to come out of the box and work like crap, and it has mid-tier specs, so you are literally paying only for its aesthetic, design, and build quality. But then even there, the problem I mentioned already is that it has some engineering problems. And the battery life, I think, at the end of the day, is going to be the real killer. Now, had they included a pen, had they included wireless charging, had they included 5G, I think that people would have been able to swallow the paltry specifications a little bit more easily. But omitting those things, I think it makes it tough even for a base consumer who's not tech spec focused, like an Apple user, and many Android users alike. It's not an insult to Apple users, but Apple has the biggest margins in the business for a reason, and that's what I think Microsoft is trying to emulate here. I just think that that's going to be an incredibly hard sell, especially we are in a pandemic, which I said earlier I could discount that, but I still can't help Microsoft, because even without a pandemic, if this phone launched in 2019, it would have had a problem. But to do it here in 2020, and they've done it early. This was supposed to come out for the holiday season. I suspect the only reason it came out early, though, was because they knew that September 1, the Z Fold 2 is going to become available for pre-order. And if it's only $500 more, I don't know why on earth you would consider this, because it will be better in every single way, except for likely, of course, the feasibility of having dual screens for, more productivity. But beyond that, I cannot see, and it'll have a smaller internal single display as well, but I cannot see how this would be compelling beyond a device like that. Because for me, the beauty of folding devices is that they are smaller, but allow you to still have a larger device because they open up. Here, again, we have an already very large device that just gets bigger once you open it. Now, I do like the hinge. It basically emulates the Flex design introduced by Samsung with the Z Flip and now with the Z Fold 2, that you can open it up, sit it down on a desk, and, it's hands-free. You have a display that you can watch video. You can put it in tent mode. It's kind of like, a Lenovo Yoga phone. Lenovo, if you're listening, I know you are making phones. Maybe it's time to make a yoga phone, if they didn't already, and I'm just not aware. And I do have a relationship with Lenovo, so if that ever happens, I'll hopefully be able to share it with all of you. But again, the first thing I did when I saw this announcement this morning was pros and cons of this device. And obviously pricing is a major con when you get into the specifications. I mean, it's really as simple as 2019 specifications, but mid-tier. I mean, yeah, the processor was flagship, but everything else, the 6 gigs of RAM, the no wireless charging, the no IP rating for water or dust resistance, the overall footprint that isn't pocketable, no 5G, no NFC, a single camera, a very small battery, which is 2 batteries, by the way, and Microsoft is claiming that they've finited the management with their own hardware, and I believe that they did, but they don't get a pat on the back for that. That's what any manufacturer with 2 batteries that need to be treated like one have to deal with. So, what does this have going for it? From, again, an aesthetic and design perspective, I think it's a beautiful piece of kit. I think it's going to feel really good in hand. It looks premium. The problem is that, looks aren't always, but in this case, are skin deep, for lack of a better way of, putting this. And that's what I feel the Surface Duo represents. And again, I feel like what we're looking at is exactly what they showed us in 2019 as a concept. And this was likely the same hardware that they had it running on back in 2019 when they said it'll be holiday 2020. And giving themselves that buffer gave themselves the time to see what the rest of the market was going to do in terms of pricing and specifications. But it seems like, and it could be just because Microsoft is feeling the pinch like everyone on this planet from this pandemic, they decided we don't really need to give the specifications that are the latest and greatest in all the features because our customers are loyal. And if we bring over Apple consumers because they can't get anything like this and they trust us more than Samsung, profit margins are king. And that is what Microsoft's been emulating from the Apple sphere now for quite some time, is can we make the same sort of margins that Apple does on brand loyalty rather than innovation? So, again, in closing, there are a lot of things to like here, but they're primarily resting in design. And I know a lot of you hate the design. I've seen so much negativity about the bezels, and I get it. I don't know why they really needed the bezels. I mean, bezels are always going to be some form of necessity with a device like this because you need to put your finger somewhere to hold it. But to me, the inexcusable stuff, besides the internal specifications and the lack of just basic mid-tier features, like I've said, like IP ratings, wireless charging, NFC, true quick charging here in 2020, I can overlook the processor. I can even overlook the 6 gigs of RAM. The thing I can't overlook is its form factor, and as I mentioned, the inability to get anything out of this device without opening it. I thought that the one-line OLED display on the front of my Z Flip was a flaw in terms of, Samsung's first-gen offering with that, but it looks like a home run compared to this because unless you have a wearable on, you're not going to have any way of knowing whether you want to accept or reject a phone call with this without leaving it in a tent mode or completely flipped open so the screens are on the outside. And that to me is just, again, from an engineering and design standpoint, a nightmare. So I really like the way it looks. I think it's a beautiful piece of hardware, but I think when it comes to practicality, productivity, which is exactly its pitch, is that it's going to make you more productive. It's going to be an extension of your Windows computer experience that you've come to know and love, but working inside the Android sphere because of all of the app support that Microsoft could never muster with their own OS, mobile OS. I don't know what they were really thinking at the end of the day because, again, the form factor and the inability to get any information without opening this is ridiculous. And, if they would have conceded, as I said earlier, just give us a pen, give us even 8 gigs of RAM, you could keep the Snapdragon 855, okay? Because there isn't a huge difference between the 855 and the 865 or the 865 Plus that's now in the Note 20 Ultra and likely in the Z Fold 2. I could deal with that difference. If that's where they had to make their margins, fine. But for me, the real takeaway, as I mentioned at the top of the video, is that I'm just glad to see them entering back into the market because at the end of the day, this gives us more parity, more competition, more options, which are always a good thing, except this at face value reminds me of the Motorola Razr that I reviewed not too long ago. And that was just a piece of crap. Now, I don't think this is going to be a piece of crap, but the Motorola Razr was the least expensive folding phone to launch, but that's also because it had the worst overall build quality and internal specifications. I mean, they were essentially delivering a $500 phone with a folding screen, and they were relying on nostalgia to market that. And I can't help but feel much of the same here, even though this looks to be a productivity machine, as I keep saying, because I could envision using this in the way Microsoft is suggesting. I just don't know how quickly I'm going to hit the wall on the lack of internal storage capacity and, of course, no way to expand it with a micro SD card slot. And then if you're trying to pitch a device that multitasks, Why skimp on the RAM? I mean, if they wanted to leave the 855, they still could have given us 12 gigs of RAM, just like the Note 10 Plus. There's really no excuse at this price point. Remember, this is more expensive than the Note 20 Ultra. So you are literally paying, and I'm not saying the Note 20 Ultra is a superstar, but compared to this, in terms of specifications and overall capability, it is, unless you just absolutely need this folio design, that the Courier was the, original foundation for this product. So this is a 20 plus minute video, but quite frankly, it deserves it because Microsoft has the opportunity with a device like this to change the game, but I can't help but feel like this is just more of the same. And I mean more of the same from Microsoft, which is that they used to be all about innovation, and now it's all about making pretty things that are pretty overpriced. And I did, as I mentioned, I pre-ordered this, and I will be reviewing it because it is unique. There is no question about it. I will not be shocked if this is on a very aggressive sale come Black Friday, and the holiday season. It seems like they realized that by the time the holiday season rolled around, everyone will have purchased their Galaxy Z Fold 2 or, of course, their new iPhone or the Note 20 Ultra, and essentially this will just be even more dead on arrival than I feel it is in its current capacity here, with specifications that outside of the actual displays and, again, the clamshell design, leave me so underwhelmed. I mean, especially that battery. I mean, at least put a bigger battery. I know there are two batteries. I know they had to come up with their own battery management system, but that's what everyone has to do that has dual batteries. It's the same thing Samsung had to do in Gen 1 of the Fold. And by the way, the first Gen Fold, I actually think, is a better device than this in every way. It's got the same processor, more RAM, a 0.5 terabyte of storage. Granted, no storage expandability. It's not 5G, just like this isn't 5G. The only edge this has is that you can put a stylus to it if you want to spend another $100+ US. And that single camera, as I mentioned, I could live with if it was the best or one of the best cameras. Like I keep saying, integrate a 1-inch sensor there, and then one camera to rule them all can work if you make it wide angle, which I don't believe this even is. 84 degrees to be exact. I see it right there. So I had hoped for a lot here, but as much as I like the design, at the end of the day, we are literally getting something that even in 2019 would have been very difficult to sell at these prices. I think even at $1,000, this would have been hard to sell in 2019. Forget about here in 2020. And I had expected this to come in at $1,000 because Microsoft certainly has the capital, and they certainly have the ability to take that hit on the first gen to get people addicted to then absolutely upgrade into Gen 2. But now, my concern is that we are looking at something that it's DOA. And, this could just be that they think they're going to sell as many units at the current pricing as they can before September 1st. That's not very much time from today on August 12th. And before Apple launches their new line of products. And then they can start slashing the price. I'm not sure how low they're going to be willing to go, but for them to drop it down to $1,000 would be a big discount on paper, but it wouldn't really be one considering that, if their margins aren't big on this, then boy, they burned such a hole on R&D over a decade. So they can keep pitching this thing as a way to disconnect once you close it up. I look at it as a way to go out of business once you close it up, because if this is a business critical machine, which is who I feel this niche is really aimed at, then how the hell can you have a device that you can't gain access to any form of information without opening it up or leaving it open all the time, which with that paltry 177 milliamp hour battery is just never going to cut it. So final thoughts. I thought the Note 20 Ultra and Note 20 were disappointing. This is far more disappointing because this really had, in my opinion, the opportunity to take on all the foldables out there. But Everything I've summed up, from the processor to the RAM, lack of Wi-Fi 6, lack of NFC, lack of wireless charging, lack of true quick charging in 2020 fashion, I just don't know how you can recommend this to anybody. So I'll have it in the studio on September 10. Hopefully that will change my mind. For those of you that follow my channel, you know I love Surface products, and that's part of the reason I already pre-ordered this. But if it doesn't change the way I use my phone, and I don't, by the way, it will change the way you have to physically use it, because I don't know how the hell you could fit it in a pocket, and I don't know how the hell it's going to be comfortable holding it in a hand, and I don't know how the hell, there's a lot of hells, you're going to feel comfortable putting it to your ear. And then to top it all off, that mono speaker, to have such a big device and not have phenomenal sound, at least poor stereo sound. Oh, Microsoft. The love-hate relationship continues. You are becoming more and more like Apple, and not in a good way. That sums it up 26 minutes later. Hope everyone enjoyed the video. It pains me that this wasn't a more positive one because I had such high hopes. The only closing note I can leave you with is that it's a start, and I believe Gen 2 will likely correct the majority of these mistakes, and I do not think they're going to give up on this after a single generation, even if it flops hard. It's just been too long in the making, and Microsoft has missed out on a mobile market that they could have owned, simply because they didn't want to do business with Android. You know, they could have been making Android-based phones a long time ago and just creating their own identity the same way Samsung did with their own UI, and that ship sailed. And here we're not only playing catch up on the software side, but we're even playing catch up on hardware, which I know I've been hammering over and over again, but everyone needs to know it if they didn't already. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. Hit that like button, and as usual, please feel free to subscribe, and please stay safe. Later.